Hello, and welcome to Alcohol Free Radio. I'm your host, Chris Becker, and I'm excited to have you join us. Whether you are new to the amazing and growing alcohol-free community, or someone who is already familiar, we hope you enjoy our program. This is where you can hear from some people making a real difference, whether as brewers and creators of amazing beverages, influencers in the community, retailers, authors, storytellers, and more. You'll be hearing from some amazing people and hopefully learn some new things about the growing world of alcohol-free. We will be using a few segment formats and hosts as we aim to break it down and bring it all together. Our goal is simple: to build awareness about this great community and help make alcohol-free fun, easy, and tasting great. So here we go. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to Alcohol Free Radio. I am setting up for a great talk that I'm about to have with Taylor Foxman from Industry Collective, mover and shaker in the non-alc and other category. So looking forward to that. It's week 12, 2025, a lot going on in the category and also just more broadly that could impact the category. Came back from like 4 trade shows: WSWA, which is the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers Association, the National Grocers Association, Expo West, which is a huge health and wellness conference. In fact, maybe the biggest conference I've ever seen, and an alliance conference of liquor and wine retailers. And my partner, Dan, is at Pro Wine this week. So there's a lot going on in the space in terms of beverage. Pepsi just announced their acquisition of Poppy. So yeah, looking forward to digging into some of those things with Taylor and kind of looking at what's happening with even, with the tariffs. So that we're hearing a lot about from the U.S. government. From what I've heard so far, the wine tariffs that are potentially going to be put in place with Europe will not affect non-alc, but who knows? So hopefully we'll be able to talk a bit more about that over the coming episodes in advance of these each interview, and try to keep on top of what's happening. So hopefully you'll get to listen in. But anyways, looking forward to you and I actually catching up with Taylor, good friend, and hearing her take on these topics and many more. So stay tuned, and you'll be up for the discussion with Taylor. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Alcohol Free Radio. I'm looking forward to this because it's a chance to catch up with a good friend and somebody who knows a lot about everything, not just in non-alc, but all things adjacent and around. Taylor Foxman from Industry Collective. Fun fact, I was checking my LinkedIn just to see what you've been posting lately. And for someone I have only known for 2 years, we have a little over 200 contacts in common. My closest and longest business associate is about 400 and something, but I've known him since 1988. So for someone I've known for 2.5 years, it's a testament to your connections, but also to have over 200 connections between us I was blown away. So first of all, welcome Taylor, and it's great to see you. It's been too long since we caught up outside of being at events together. So I guess first things first. Yes, going to events, talking in front of groups, all your favorite stuff.
All my favorite stuff.
What have you been doing?
What have I been doing? Getting convinced by Chris to go on video is what I've been doing. Also, item number 3.
Thank you, by the way.
I'm not comfortable with, of course. No, it's been. I mean, if you read the news, it's obviously everyone is being impacted by things going on, but in the beverage industry in particular, it's an interesting moment in time because I sit in a really interesting spot, as I call myself, like a sheep herder. But I sit in the middle between kind of this founder community worldwide. And that's kind of all encompassing, right? All across beverage and cannabis. Right. And then you have corporate. And up until now, I would say that, the founders were always looking at these bigger corporations, like from an aspirational perspective. How do I become bigger like that? How do I get integrated into brands like that and companies like that? And it's this inflection point where everyone is feeling it. at the same time.
Yeah.
And no one really has an answer to a lot of the questions that are kind of looming and what's
Yeah. Big
happening,
or small.
and big or small. And it kind of feels like a really interesting moment in time where the playing field is leveled and everyone is starting from kind of a square one to figure out what the future looks like. And for, NA and for other companies, it's really exciting. For alcohol, I think it's a time of reflection and a time to potentially not necessarily start new, but really think about the way that we've been doing things. Is it the right
Yeah.
way moving forward? So
Okay.
it's been a really cool time. I know that was more philosophical. I think you were asking like where have I been traveling, but
Well,
that's where my
no,
head was at.
travelings would be good. I'm sure some fun and exciting places, but also
Yeah.
kind of where you've been spending some time. Like I'll weave it into, so I'm not a big trade show. I'm not good at trade shows. I kind of joke that it's where people who can't buy go to meet people who can't sell. Um, but you have to go, and I'm getting better at it. And I'm obviously happy to and excited to talk about what we're doing and learn a lot from people that are in the space.
Yeah.
But in the
Yeah.
past 6 weeks, I went to
You were all over. You
I
were
went to
all over.
WSWA, National Grocers Association. We were asked to come to because they see the category.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Expo West, which was I had people had told me, and it blew my mind in terms of what I saw. And then a smaller but very business oriented, get shit done. A lot called the Alliance, which is where liquor chains come together and do kind of alignment and strategy. And to take one example, the WSWA, and I'm the first to admit I've lost all perspective when it comes to beverage more broadly, which is why it's so much fun to talk to you. I come in thinking, well, it's been non-alc and it's been 10 years since beer has come a long way. And, they're seeing the opportunities. And I come in thinking, based on some of the people that I talk to, which I realize now it's a natural selection. Anybody who's coming to me from alc is probably self-selecting as someone who's kind of looking at
Yeah.
is open to ideas
At
and
least
thinking
open
different
to
things.
it.
So I went to
Yeah.
WSWA thinking along those lines, and it was an interesting awakening. Just in terms of, first of all, it was not a fun place to. I bet you there's been other years where that's a fun conference to go to. This was not one of those years,
Yeah.
partly because it was in
Yeah.
Denver in the winter. So next
They
year's in
usually do
Vegas.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say
So
sometimes I think they have done it in Denver before, but like you pair
yeah,
cold weather with everything that's happening in the world. I think it,
yeah.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
weren't in. It
Understood.
wasn't like the Aspen conference. Like it wasn't. It was like Denver near the airport. And
Oh,
then
oh, oh.
next year's Vegas. So I suspect it'll be more people. But it was also, I went to listen to Nielsen and everybody talk. It's not a lot of good news out there.
No.
It was a lot of lines going down and to the right, and a lot of numbers with a dash in front of them. So, and when I talk to people about, well, non-alcs thing, it's
Yeah.
like people are still angry and in denial. They're not in the part of the change curve where they're in acceptance and reflection. So, and that was an interesting awakening for me because I'm obviously, I have a inaccurate perception because of where I sit. So, I was speaking to the wine council a couple weeks before that, and I was like, well, again, a lot of lines down to the right with numbers with dashes in front of them, but non-alc was up 25%, but it's on such a small base. It's
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
even talk to me until there's a couple more zeros behind those numbers. So that was interesting. And the grocer, the expo NA was big there. So I'm interested in your travels because you've kind of gone through what you're seeing. Because for me, it was a
Yeah.
realization that sometimes you think, oh my God, we're missing it. It's the ship has already left with seeing what, different brands are doing. But then when I come back from these and I'm like, wow, I think it's just getting started in terms of non-alc.
But I think also, I think a lot of people have the misconception that when you think of NA, I guess if we think about like NA, non-alc in particular, like it
Yeah.
is still a small subset, right? And I get
Super
that.
small. Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
But what I try to instill when people ask me about the categories, like you have so many other subcategories that are chipping at that iceberg.
Yeah.
It's not just fake wine, fake beer, de-alkalized
That's
wine,
right.
de-alkalized beer. It's it's the broader discussion around are you drinking alcohol and are you
More.
not? And if you're
Yeah.
not, or if you're integrating less alcohol and more other things, then that pie is actually much larger
Yeah.
because you have the poppies of the world that just sold for almost
Right.
$2 billion. You have the Olipops. You have the mushroom drinks, the protein
Yeah.
drinks, the CBD, the THC. So when you think about that pie, I think when people make comments like that, I think more often than not, in my opinion, Chris, I feel like they're a little bit narrow-minded in what that encompasses because yes, the NA specific non-alc cocktail mixer NA, sorry guys, let me get rid of that, is definitely a smaller part of the pie.
Sure.
However, when you think about that bigger discussion around what are they drinking, I think people are thinking more broadly and they could be drinking a fake wine or they could be drinking a cannabis or a cannabis cocktail
Yeah.
or they could be drinking water. So in reality, that is a huge pie when you
Yeah.
think about it because the occasion settings for what you drink when you drink them are now totally flipped on its head. Where
Yeah.
it used to be, you would go to a bar, you would go out to dinner, you'd go to bachelorette, you would go on a trip, and you would drink alcohol or you wouldn't. Now, you may opt for, a non-alcoholic cocktail and then switch to water, switch to cannabis. So it's just to me, when people make comments like that, I feel like it's a little bit narrow-minded only because I think that when we think about kind of that broader conversation around like what are people drinking
Yeah.
as an alternative to alcohol, it's much bigger than that. That's all.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, and I want to hear a bit more about what your sense is of those other categories, and maybe we'll dive into THC in particular. But and it wasn't any one comment; it was more the general feel that
Yeah, right,
things have been
right.
pretty good since prohibition, I guess, like for a while, maybe
Yeah.
not that long, but for a while. And if you look at, for example, what Reyes has done with RNDC in
Tito's
California,
and
and you're
yeah,
seeing a lot of chipping away. Like you said, it's not even just categories of beverage. It's also e-commerce and direct to
yeah.
consumer. And now you've got beer distributors
Distribution,
getting
right.
in on,
Selling Tito's.
yeah. And I think you've seen a lot of maybe elements of the tiers of the
Yep.
each part of the three tier system has maybe been protected from disruption for quite a long time, and now it's happening in a lot of
Yeah.
different ways. And it's interesting to
Yeah.
see who's responding, who's entering, and like you said, it's with I don't even want to almost stop myself from saying this, but things like AI. Sorry, I said it. I won't say it again. But these
Oh
small
God.
companies are able to punch above their weight and do things against bigger competitors that maybe have had it too good for too long and are now seeing. So I think some of them will pivot, like Intel pivoted when they went from memory chips to semiconductors, whatever it is, or computer processors, whatever it is, that's going to happen, but it's going to take some time and it may take some change in people in certain roles to make it happen.
Yeah. I think right now it's just, I mean, think about you have the distribution system, even just using that, for example, just going there
Yeah.
for a minute. And like, this is the most archaic, medieval thing ever. I mean, we're in an industry on the outside. It's a gate-kept industry. Like it's a
Okay. Yeah.
gate-kept
Yeah.
industry. I don't
Right.
mean it is what it is, right?
Right.
Like you have an industry where you now think about it. Think about it. If we just stay in beverage for a minute, like you want
Yeah.
to create a new version of Orangina, you
Yeah.
could do it. Technically, you could do it today. You could sell
Right.
it online or you could go through whatever. In alcohol, you really like literally have to be let into the industry to do what you do. And up until now, there have been, a handful of these groups that have literally been able to dictate who gets into the industry and who doesn't for the most part, like from like a
Right.
macro perspective. You could use other solutions, but broadly speaking, and like you said, you now have like players like Reyes, and even I work for a company called Brothers Bond, which is this like pretty good celebrity, it's a great celebrity whiskey. They partnered with Banfi, which is another
Yeah.
company that I used to work for when I was doing
For sure.
PR, which is a wine brand,
Huge. Yeah.
long-standing wine company. And so anyway, the point of the matter is like it's this inflection point where it's just like not only do I think companies need to think about like who their consumer is, what they're drinking, and like the broader changes that are happening in terms of like preferences, but also like from the perspective of like vendors and supplier
Yeah.
partners, like everyone should just like look at what's happening and be like, let's just use this as a moment in time as an industry, maybe just to to take a step back and
Yeah.
I won't say pivot because
No,
I
no,
can't.
but
I'm allergic to it. But to think about
be a bit
what
paranoid
the
about what's
future.
happening.
Yeah, to think, well, yeah, but to think about what, I mean, it could be exciting if people think about it, but outside the tariff stuff, which is just, really bad for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
most part. But the changing consumer, I get calls very often, a few times a month from the corporate strategics who bring me in, Chris, who say
yeah.
like, we can't avoid this anymore. Like,
Right,
we're
right.
still going to sell alcohol, but we would be remiss not to talk with you and others that are, experts in the space about like what else is out there and what we should place bets on. And so I think some of them are coming to that consensus. And then you also see that some of these groups that had arms that were helping incubate earlier brands are shutting down or closing up shop. So I think given everything that's happening, I couldn't think of a better time to just clear the
Yeah.
playing field and
Okay.
start again.
Interesting. Okay, so that was a bit of a segue to where I was gonna go, and the other thing, and again, my perspective is from meeting makers because we talk to them about the marketplace or brand activations, or we're evaluating products to bring into the core beverage
Yeah.
P&L for distribution and wholesale. I was like, well, this is going to start flattening out. And, I was just talking to Dan, my co-founder, who's just finished up at Pro Wine. And he was like, there was, yeah, he's awesome. So he was like, he couldn't believe how many new non-alc wines were coming in. So I was so wrong again. It's actually
Wrong.
getting more. And there's reasons. There's obviously lots of juice out there, and the technology is growing in terms of people and companies that are branching off and starting up that part of the industry and trying different ways to get at that. So that's back to that earlier point where it seems to be there are people that are stepping out in front of their competitors or their compatriots within the ALC system in
Yeah.
all three tiers. So that was
Yep.
kind of where I was going to go with that. Talk a bit more about not without naming names, like what are you seeing and when they step up, so whether it's
Yeah.
the retail tier or the distribution
Yeah.
tier or the maker tier, when
Yeah.
people step forward and are like, okay, I'm past my anger, I'm past my denial, I'm ready to lean in,
It's
what
here.
what
It's
are
not
they
going
interested in?
anywhere. Right.
Like THC beverages is a piece, there's the non-out, but like where are you seeing people leaning in and also maybe leaning back? So let's talk a bit about Distill and Diageo. And
Yeah.
like I talk to them a lot about Ritual now because now they've brought it into the mothership and they're leaning
Yeah.
into it fully. But then
Fully. Yeah.
it was interesting. I was just talking to Distill before that, and then I saw that news. So talk a bit about like where in the landscape are you seeing the players leaning in?
I mean, on the corporate side, I mean, they're all, if they haven't invested in NA, they're thinking about it. It's easier than we'll get into THC and CBD. Like they're thinking about it. Either they're going to do it themselves or they're going to buy someone who's built it. I mean, those
Right.
those purchases haven't really happened yet, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
It's a
kind of waiting on the
weird time.
sidelines for weird time. I think that the minute that one of the bigger non-alc players that's independent gets bought or come, like a Poppy situation with
Yeah.
obviously like maybe an athletic or one of the other ones, it's
Yeah.
going to
That'll
happen
set the tone.
immediately. It'll set the tone. In the interim, though, look, I think all of them are at least at the point where they're like, this isn't a fad. Are we going to lean into it? Like you said, like a Diageo would? No, absolutely not. Because a lot of these alcohol companies too, Chris, are like, you know, from, eight, I mean, they're decades and decades upon decades, like in different, from Europe, like they're all over Europe or they're all over Asia. These are companies you
Right.
can't just like all of a sudden just, hey, we're gonna do, a fake
Yeah.
beer, a fake wine. Like maybe they can, maybe they can't. But there's so many layers and processes to these things
Yeah.
that it's a lot of it right now seems to be, let me learn more. I see the
Right.
stats, I see the stories, I get the stories.
Yeah.
Categories
Heard
here.
it.
I don't
Yeah.
need one more
Get it.
story.
Stop telling me about it
Stop
being a
telling
thing.
me about it. I literally don't need one more
Yeah.
Nielsen. Not, I love Nielsen, but I'm saying like one more Nielsen story. But at the same time, they're not like jumping the gun, like, hey, who are the five brands that I should buy tomorrow?
Yeah.
So I feel like there is this like dance that's happening where they're starting to talk to people like you, talk to people like me, starting to, through people like us, talk to brands,
Right.
understand, work with retailers. like
Yeah.
understand how
Right.
grocery things, how distributors are thinking about it. So they're at this like exploratory moment in time where they're like, okay, the time for the most part, the times where we thought this was something that's going to come and go, it's not.
Yeah.
Whether or not they agree, Chris, that like everyone's going to be drinking fake wine tomorrow. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the case. And I've written about this 3 times now for Rolling Stone. So I don't
Right.
believe in the all or nothing. I
No.
don't think they
Neither
believe in
do
all or
we.
nothing.
No. No way.
However, neither of us do. However, I do think they're doing this like tiptoe where they're very much behind the scenes starting to talk to experts
Right.
and like the GoPuffs of the world and the retailers of the world and
Yeah.
investors to be like, what do we bet on? And going back to your point around like AI, I don't know anything. I don't know. I do not know anything about AI. I'm not making a comment. That was the only AI thing I'm going to say. But there are corporate strategic groups, Chris, that are betting on the technologies,
Yes.
and that's really cool.
Yeah.
And they're actually deploying money now. And I think we've talked about this. A lot of the corporate strategics that I work with, especially on the wine strategic side, their feedback is I've tried every fake wine,
Yeah.
every non-alc wine, every de-alkalized wine. And we believe that some are really good. And they are looking at some of them, by the way. I'm not ruling
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
that
For
there
sure.
aren't discussions being had. But the consensus is there are some winners, and we're talking to them or tell us if we're missing any. But the general feedback is that there's still a lot of room for improvement when it
Huge.
comes to
Yeah.
the taste. So they're looking at are there technologies and innovations and things that are synergistic that could not only maybe help their portfolio if they choose to leverage that technology,
Yeah.
but the broader industry. So I think on the NA side, and then I'll go to cannabis in a minute, is
Okay.
that I think we're at this like flirting, dancing phase where unless you're living under a rock, you're aware that this is here to stay.
Right.
Are we all in agreement that everyone's drinking fake bubbles every night? No, everyone has different perspectives on this, but drinking non-alc and having alternative options is here to stay. And I think really it's going to come down to that, like we talked about, that rush and that influx is going to happen when one of these NA brands gets bought, because that's usually when all the corporates in Italy are like, oh, probiotic soda, $2 billion. Don't we? Do we have one?
What's
And they're
that?
like, yes, we've had one for 6 years. You just haven't ever
Yeah.
focused on it. So anyway, that's my thought around the NA.
Yeah.
And then on the THC CBD, my favorite. I like NA as much as I like CBD and THC.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
like CBD. I like THC.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. No, it gives you a payload. It for whatever reason. I think
for
that's,
whatever it
if any, it's
works.
very interesting, right? So where it complements or where it competes, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it adds again. I can't stop thinking about this iceberg. I can't. I have not stopped thinking about an iceberg, Chris, for like 6 months. Where,
Okay.
and I built my whole career in the industry. I still
What is the
work
iceberg?
booze.
Okay. Just
It's
making
a
sure I
big.
keep up with your analogy.
Okay, it's a big iceberg that has
Right.
been slowly moving across the world. And I would say, during COVID, it got maybe a little, I don't even know if icebergs can get bigger, but I think it
Sure
did.
they can.
And
They gotta
okay, great. I don't know how it works. So they're bigger
I'm from
icebergs.
Canada, so I can tell you they get bigger, and you're
They
from the
get bigger.
US, so you can see them getting smaller.
I can see them getting smaller. So I just keep thinking about the analogy of this very solidified iceberg, which has been the alcohol industry. And, I think every one of these things, whether it's a tariff or whether it's the Surgeon General warning or whether it's the incorporation of
Right, right.
NA, or they keep chipping away
GLP-1.
at it. Yeah, well, that was the interesting part too, is that I spoke with one of the top three corporate strategics. I won't like say which numeric
Yeah,
one
yeah.
because you can figure it out. And they said that their biggest headwind is Ozempic. So
Yes.
again, when you
We
think
saw that a
about
lot too.
yeah, so when you think about when you ask the question around where THC fits in it, it's the broader chipping away at it, and it
Yeah.
could be Ozempic, it could be water, poppy, it could be THC. So I think THC is going to be much harder to answer your question for adaptation from a corporate perspective for 100
Yeah.
reasons,
From a risk perspective.
until it's like, yeah, federally legal. I think that from an innovation perspective, it's way further along, and we've talked about this, I
Yeah.
think, before. You can ship, I sound like a broken record, but like you can ship direct to consumer now. You have flavorless, calorieless, carbless iterations that look like tequila bottles. You have RTDs. You have what I like are these little, I just can't find the founder of this company. It's driving me nuts. It's called Wims. And it's a little
Okay.
sachet. You know me not finding a founder,
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
introduced to a founder is like, I
Well,
can't.
and I
If
want you
you
to
own
mix in
Wims,
all your favorite, whether it's SpongeBob or a snack that you like. Please don't hesitate to throw them into the conversation because
okay,
that's
I
how I
will.
stay
Today
up
I'm
to
being
top.
very formal. So you have like all these companies that are like now direct to consumer. They don't have calories, they don't have carbs. It's like a tequila. You can make cocktails with them. You could do RTDs. There's always been roadies, which are the powders. But then you have like these other companies called like Wims,
Okay.
which is I work with Emily from Pop Up Grocer, and I
Okay.
found them at Pop Up Grocer, and they're little sachets,
Okay.
unflavored, nothing to them. And you literally go to dinner, crack it, 4 milligrams of THC
Throw it in.
in your cocktail. So,
Nice.
point of the
Yeah.
matter is, that's not for everyone, and obviously, like you have to be careful with that stuff. But the point of the matter
Yeah.
is, I think at the end of the day, I think cannabis is moving honestly really quickly
Yeah.
in terms of product formats, dosages. So it used to just be, a lot of the bigger conglomerates where I came from. So I came from Big Alc and Big Cannabis, and there were high dosages, like you would just get
Yeah.
stoned
Yeah.
or have
No.
pre-rolls and
12
or have
milligram
12
THC
milligram
beverage.
THCs and stuff. I think this low dosage sector, which is like, I'm so sorry, I don't know
Well,
what to
A,
do.
it,
I'm so
no
sorry.
one can see it, so don't worry if it's
I'm
showing up.
sorry.
Two
I
things.
keep
One is
getting
the,
off.
um, I think we were talking about this at one of the conferences, and A, it keeps you, that's where the main, I was talking to, and I forget, I can't remember her name, but it's kind of, there's a cannabis beverage association, kind of like there's an adult non-alc beverage
Yeah.
association. 99.9% this woman. I can't remember her name. I was talking to her. I
Diana
think so. Yeah. It was,
Everland.
and we were talking about kind of the average consumer, like both for non-alc and THC. There's
Yeah.
some THC beverages. There's a lot of alignment in terms of demographics, gender,
Yeah.
age range, and
Yep.
they don't want to have their head blown off. They want to go out with their friends and maybe have the equivalent of a 2 beer buzz, right? So we're talking 2 milligrams, 3 milligrams, whatever
Two
does
to
it for you,
five. 2 to 5.
whatever it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
less, and it also
Yep.
has the extra benefit of probably keeping you on side of and de-risking what the states are doing, because every state's got somebody in their house passing laws. In Connecticut they went to 3, so, and then you've got everybody running around reformulating every time. I wish we hadn't done a 3.5 when we should have done a 3. So it also keeps you kind of out of trouble, maybe. But I
It
think it's the
does.
fat part of the market, anyways.
It is, but it's also, I mean, well, a lot of the, again, like a lot of the suppliers that I work with are way on the cannabis side are way more like, I would say informed as to like exactly like what sells and why, but there is
Right.
a huge audience for the higher milligram.
Sure.
But one thing that's interesting, so you know how we talk about like rituals and like that's why a lot of the NA brands call themselves like rituals or things
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that because it's okay.
It's part of the yeah.
Consumers, especially the younger demo that aren't drinking that much, there's this bigger thematic around owning my time, my time. And
Okay.
I don't want to be
Interesting.
wasted. Also, I'll explain where I'm going with this. So, a lot of feedback is I don't want to drink because my parents my parents are alcoholics, or I don't want to drink because I don't want to be not in control, or I don't want to drink
Right.
because
Right.
of financial. There's hundreds of reasons. But I keep seeing this over and over again, which is it's my time the next day that I'm losing by
Yeah.
being
Which is really
right.
a lot of
Um,
awareness there, but yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot of awareness, and I think whether you're talking about NA options or you're talking about cannabis beverages or whatever, there is a beauty in which is different than NA.
Yeah.
There, unless it's functional, like a kin or
Sure.
a hio or
Sure.
whatever, you still get the same. Like you still feel better, or you feel relaxed, or you feel you have a notable. There's a notable impact, like whether it's 2 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, whatever. The only difference is like the next day is yours.
Yes. Yeah, you get that back,
But
or you never
that's a
lost it.
huge, but that is a huge, Chris, that's like for the younger generation, like that's why they don't want to go most of the time to happy hours with my husband
Yeah,
and his team. Like, I'm kidding, but like,
yeah, yeah,
coworkers, they don't want to go out after work
yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
They don't want to do these things because it impacts their next day. So I actually am not kidding. I think another huge benefit to NA and also to cannabis, but maybe even more so to cannabis, is there is that you do get a direct impact if you
yeah,
take THC like you would with alcohol. And if you do a lower dosage, you're in control.
yeah.
And then you
And
wake up and it's your
it's
day.
not the same. Yeah, I was interesting.
Does that
Totally
check
makes
out?
sense.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Yeah.
especially I think it with respect to the positive aspects of, I'll call it Gen Z and to some extent millennials. It's those types of things. Generally, better access to information, better awareness about the impacts of the information that they're
Now,
collecting on their
yeah.
health and wellness,
Yeah.
and then using that information to make changes to their
Dictate their
behavior. So that a
lifestyle,
lot of
right?
what you're describing is the positive, and that goes also with the self-expression of their own personal choice. Like,
Right.
whether it's sexuality or what I choose to ingest or how I choose to spend my time, no Gen Z's really giving their friends a hard time like a Gen X friend would have given me a hard time if I was out at a bar in 1992 and decided not to drink. Like that
We would
wouldn't
have
have
been such good friends,
that
Chris.
wouldn't have gone over very well.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I would have to find different friends. So I think there's that whole payload of positive information and behavior, and you grow up with it, right? It's one thing to,
Yeah.
we have all that now too, but when you're 54, it's not the same as when you're 24. Then there's the other side of it too. So, which I've heard, and take it for what it's worth, since we're kind of going through the inventory of everything from Ozempic through to some of the demographic aspects, is there's also a pretty good awareness of their online brand, individual personal brand. So no one was around in dating myself, 1988 after a high school party
When I was
when
born.
did God knows, yeah, exactly. See, so
Good year.
no one was there with a camera putting it up
Yeah.
on TikTok,
Yeah.
right? So there's
Yeah.
awareness of personal brand, and I think that's had an impact. And also just, for those folks whose formative years partially were done happened through pandemic, you weren't out learning some of the bad habits that
No.
maybe we were all learning. So you were home socializing online or socializing in different ways. So those are two additional things that maybe are more on the negative side that I think cause people to think differently about how they choose to interact with alcohol, which leads you both to NA and to THC, whether it's seltzers or beverages. But if you're getting your NA through a gummy, then or through a tincture is kind of what you were calling a sachet.
Yeah.
You can put that into an NA adult drink too. It's like take this Visitor non-alc beer, put that tincture in, and you've got like a 2 beer buzz, right? So, which is a call out, guys. The Visitor guys, like talk to
I'm supposed
Taylor.
to
Maybe
talk to them.
you should
I'm
bring
supposed to
those
talk
two
to them.
things together. No one's
I'm
created a
supposed to
good
talk to them this
NA 2 beer
afternoon.
buzz. Good.
Yes, there is. There is. Joe Chura.
Oh, okay, good. I'll have to ask him about that.
Easy
'Cause
man.
yeah,
Easy man.
remember,
He
I'm
created
talking
a
to him
beer. He
tomorrow.
created a beer that it's a THC beer. It's like a pale ale with THC.
Good.
Talk to him about that. And the
Good. I
visitor
have to do
team I'm
less
talking with
research.
today. Yeah,
Good.
less research. Look,
Let me know.
We're boring Miss Linda. Look, she's
Where?
passed out on the floor.
We can't really see. Can you just, for those of you who want to see your
Oh,
adorable
she's my
pet?
dog.
Okay.
There
So
she
since we're
is.
talking about your dog, and then my kids are now watching SpongeBob, which I like because I think it's hilarious, but it's because of you. I was mentioning it about it, so that's their new favorite
Oh, I
show.
miss
So
them.
thank
I
you.
miss them. Of course.
Um,
You're actually very welcome. It's a great show. There's
um,
more shows that they could watch, to
no,
say
that's
the
enough for
least.
now. That's enough for now. So listen, thinking about, so we've talked a bit about kind of what we're seeing generally in the broader
Yep.
landscape of the marketplace. We've talked a bit about the various categories of what we're seeing within beverage. I want to come back to the point about technology. So we have seen that as well. So whether and if you look towards, I'll take non-alc beer, and I'm not an expert, so anybody who's listening, if there is anybody listening, who knows the beer technology of non-alc, I look at it kind of very simply as you can de-alcoholize. So all the
Right.
name brands, for
Right.
example, are
Right.
true. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly what the ABV is, but it's zero point 0.
Yeah.
Or you've got Athletic and others that are doing, again, I'm not an expert, but some sort of arrested fermentation where you're slowing the creation of alcohol while the beer is becoming, fermenting with the
Yeah.
hops. Um, that's a technology. And, I'll just look at it from a consumer basis. I think it's fair to say that non-alc beers have come a long way compared to 10 years
Yep.
ago. And what you could have
Yep.
gotten 10 years ago and the perception, that's the other thing. The perception has changed. It's
Perception
not
too.
just the
Yep.
quality of the product. So
Yep.
beer, the product has changed, and people will say that it's better.
Isn't it easier to make, they say it's easier to make non-alc beer than it is wine,
Well,
obviously,
that's
right? Yeah.
definitely, we can get into that. But let's take non-alc spirits and RTDs, which don't have the same challenges as wine. Before we get to wine, because let's end
Yeah.
on wine. But
Yep.
there's lots of things. That's a wide range of brands and
Right.
products that you can
Right.
get into, and most spirit our alternatives are not de-alcohol. You can't take a 40% ABV and de-alkalize it. You have nothing left. So those are just flavor representations
Yeah.
of say a tequila, take on tequila or take on whiskey or rum or what have you. So, but nevertheless, that's a whole area of technology too. There are flavor
Yeah.
houses and experts and there are companies not dissimilar to Better Rose, but are really leaning into the technology
Tech.
of
Yeah. Yep.
coming up with something that can be pourable without having to turn a spirit alternative into a. I know lots of people who can make a non-alc margarita that you would have trouble detecting, but you got to do a lot of stuff to the drink to make it happen.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but a pour
Yeah.
over is a whole other challenge. So if you look at what's happening to beer, spirits, I think people maybe would buy in. Yeah, you can get a good mocktail here and there and some good RTDs that are great to do that in a pop and pour. But then you get to wine, and I think like I'm speaking more and more to tech and to your point about the corporates, it's one thing that a winery can make a great wine, do
Yeah.
the best they can at de-alkalizing it, and there's a lot of great
Hmm.
companies that do it, and there are
Yeah.
better and worse techniques to retain the
Right.
flavor
Right.
and things you do post
Right.
dealkalization on the dosage and the
Yeah.
dosage, sorry, and the adding musk
On the
elements.
dosage.
I've been corrected on that before.
I've
But
never once called it. I've never once said it like that. Now I feel like
maybe I'm just
embarrassed.
wrong.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, maybe I have to check.
Dosage.
I think so. It's like dosage. I'm sure I was definitely told that somewhere in Europe. Um, so,
Oh
but
boy.
then, so that's the way you make non-alc wines. But I'm talking to more and
Yeah.
more companies that are coming up with, I won't even call it a better mousetrap, something in place of the mousetrap instead of kind of like beer. It's like, I don't think you have to be, we're not splitting the atom here, but it's not easy. Like if you take a perfectly good wine and then you kick the crap out of it by taking out all the
Yeah.
alcohol, then you got to bring it back. That's a lot of
Yeah.
time. That's a lot of
Yeah.
electricity. That's a lot of energy. And it's all the time and energy is on getting the wine back to where it was in some
Was
elements
right.
instead
Which is
of,
crazy. Right. It's like getting it
yeah.
right.
Well, and
Yeah.
even the younger generation, if they knew the sustainability impact on the process, like the electricity alone, it's not a great story. So obviously, if you can somehow create the wine and ferment the grapes or remove the alcohol in a more efficient way at the
Yeah.
molecular level, instead of
Yeah.
having to use heat or
Yeah.
so again, I'm not going to go. I'm not the technology expert, but there are companies out there. What do you like? What do you think? It is harder, but like if you had to place a bet, like do you think wine can get to where beer is now and change? Because I think even wines, they're getting better, but the customer would generally say, no, they're still not. They wouldn't say about non-alc wines what they say about
The way
non-alc
they
beer
say about
today.
I have Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty hard stance on it. My stance is like, just stop expecting it to be wine.
There's that too.
Ex
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like, I mean, there are CEOs of some of the largest hospitality groups in the country, like, I believe Levy Restaurant Group, if I'm not mistaken, one of the either the founder or the president or someone at a C-suite level doesn't drink. And they, up until at least a few months ago, uh, don't have like a whole robust like
Right.
NA wine program.
Sure.
And I asked
We do.
why, and they said, yeah, and they said because, we just don't think as a sommelier that it's up to par, to our
Yeah.
standards. And I said, well, lower your standards. And I mean that in a nice way.
Yeah.
Because I think, like with beer, as said, like they've been making non-alc beer. Like my husband's best friend is a fourth generation brewmaster in Germany. Like they've been making
Yeah. There's
beer all over
classes
the
about it.
world for,
Yeah.
yeah, forever and ever. So like this isn't new, right? And
Right.
the taste, it can get better, to your point, but it's already pretty good and it's gotten better and whatever. With wine, I think wine is just one of those things where people are expecting it to just be as good as wine. And I think you got to just realize that even if the technology continues to get better, it's not based
Yeah.
on exactly like everything you went through. Like it's not going to be the same as having a glass of Merlot. But what we've been trying to do in the industry through what you do and through the suppliers is create an alternative that still evokes the same moment in time where you feel,
Yeah.
you have a celebratory moment. I love the brand Toast, like Toast to it, or
Yeah. Exactly.
any of these
Yeah.
companies, like, and I think it's actually less on like, the brand and the supplier and the technology, to be honest, and more on the consumer to understand that. Same thing with the non-alc spirits, like, functional is different because they don't know what to expect, so they're like, this
Sure.
elixir tastes good because
Yeah.
it's an
I
elixir,
always say they've been
but
doing
like
that since
with
the Old West with elixirs, people coming into town and opening
yeah,
up the
right,
stage
with
with
a
their
little, but
tonics and potions.
right. Oh, dude, 100%. But like with spirits, like I feel like people have very polarizing thoughts around it. Like this tastes nothing like my margarita. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
But with wine, I think everyone wants to give it a shot. But I also think that their expectations aren't really realistic because I think that the technology can get better, and we've met, I think, in the event that I invited you to, that we went for, Lawrence, who
Yeah,
is a
absolutely.
partner of my
That's a great
group.
example.
Wh-
Yeah.
yeah, where they're using a technology that is helping to like evoke like the terroir and the nose of what. So like things are happening in the
Yeah.
space
It is
from a
going to get
technology
better. Yeah.
perspective to get better. But I also think that consumers need to realize like it's not going to taste exactly like wine. And I don't know if we're ever going to get to the point where you close your eyes and it is a Malbec. Like I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that the industry, through the brands and through the technology, we're getting better, and it's getting better, and the taste is getting better. But I think it's all change is also going to have to come from on and off premise too. Like you're going to have to incorporate on menus some of these products where people are going to say, okay, this is the wine
Yeah. Well,
if
it,
I want to have a wine. Trader
yeah.
Joe's now has a few options for non-alc wine in New York City. Those are the options. So people are going to say, okay, if I want to drink a
Something.
non-alc wine, like I've had Athletic, there's something here. If I want to go to Smith and Wolenski's, I have an option. And it's starting to happen, but I would say it's not happening as rapidly as we want and as kind of mainstream as we want.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Right.
going to come from those bigger groups like Marriott's and Hyatt's and Levy's and Live Nations to be able to just kind of like make this more mainstream, where people are just going to say, okay, this is what we have, and like you get an option for everything else. Like these are our options. This is our option for
Right.
NA wine. And if people don't want to drink it because they don't think that it's up to par, then there are other options for them. But I think the expectations, if you get what I'm saying, I think they need to just become a
Yeah.
little bit more
I think it's a
realistic.
I think it's a confluence of that. So starting with that, I think I call that the Diet Coke effect. So, I remember, or I think I remember trying a Diet Coke for the first time, and how would you not have the expectation that it's going to taste like Coke? And it
Yeah.
doesn't. But Diet
Yeah.
Coke maybe outsells Coke in America. I don't even know, but it certainly is a successful
Must at this
it's a
point. Yeah.
successful brand. Diet, and
Yeah.
even if you look at light beer, like not even non-alc, but your Miller Lite compared to
Yeah.
Miller, Coors Light compared to
Yeah.
Coors, or Bud Light compared to, they all outsell their full strength cousins.
Mm,
So
mm.
the expectation payload is already there, but wine, you're right. There's something different. I think
It's
partly
totally different. I don't know
on the
why.
demand side, I think it is different for some people. we sell like, based on the sales that we see, we know it's non-alc wine is still a successful category. For some people, they've already discounted that payload of we get it. They've had the Diet Coke recalibration of their expectations,
Yeah.
but now they're on a hunt for we get it, but we're still looking for the next. We're still open, so we got a lot
But
of
can I
customers that are always looking for. They're willing to experiment because they want to go up
want to
from
find
that.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah, they want to find. Now I have a question. So the way, like, I love RTDs, period, in
right.
every category. Like the RTD category in alcohol is the shining light. Like
Yeah,
RTDs are doing really
for
well.
sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
like sales wise, revenue wise, like everything, growth wise. So on the NA side, and this is like a question for you. So on the NA side, I work with brands that do have canned options.
yeah,
Wine is really expensive. All the NA is pretty expensive, but I do
yeah,
think that from an exploratory perspective, you have canned beer. Obviously, beer is canned. And then you have spirits, a lot of them which being in an RTD format.
sure.
I love RTD, ready to drink format, ready to serve formats, because I think, especially in the non-alc space, you have no clue unless you've tried it before what you're buying.
Right.
So to buy a $49 bottle of non-alc wine, to me, it would be fairly prohibitive cost-wise, but also just like taking a
Yeah.
gamble, like you said, right? So why do you think that not every like NA wine company, excuse me, would want to put out, obviously, other than like manufacturing, take all that out, like just at a high level, like, or are you seeing that more wine companies are starting to do cans? Because I feel that is a way to get more
Sure.
people to sample it, to try it in in a way that's more it's not as cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it kind of bifurcates into two categories. So I'll just look at traditional wine, and a lot of our best investors and partners are people
Yeah.
who've stepped forward from the alc industry,
Yeah.
Bevrest, Bevstack, some of the distributors
Yeah.
that we work with, and they're like, we get it, we see the opportunity, we get it's early days, we'll work with you, and we do a lot of merchandising experience. Some work, some doesn't, in terms of how this going, but at least it's happening. There's a foot in the door, kind of
Yeah.
like like you said, non-alc beer has been on the shelves for decades, so there was something to grow from. With non-alc wine, it was kind of, except for Welch's grape
Yeah.
juice, there's really nothing. So in terms of on trade,
Yeah.
especially off trade, on trade is still got a long way to go, but that's a huge opportunity, upside opportunity. So when you look at traditional wine, I think other formats besides your classic 750 is looked down upon by the industry to
Yeah.
some extent, and wine in cans hasn't done as well. Now, I'm setting aside, I don't even know what you call the Tetra Packs, like the beat boxes and stuff
Tetra
like
Packs,
that.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
killing it.
That's
So,
we're in a Tetra Pak. Yeah, we
yeah,
sold 5.5 million. I think 5.5
yeah. So it's crazy. So
million
there's,
Tetra Paks.
but
Yeah, it's
cans,
crazy.
so some of the feedback I get is doesn't work in wine. But non-alc wine, and this is where it is different. The consumer buying decisions are different. Um,
Yeah,
the and there's some preconceived notions. So one is they're buying. I mean, they're seriously like they're literally buying it not for the opposite reasons, but for somewhat adjacent reasons. They're not the exact same
yeah,
decision paths that get you in there. And one of the things we 100% see from the customer perspective, and this is where I get into not arguments, but people don't like to hear what I have to say about this, is the consumer is like, here's the consumer. Well, there's no booze in it. I'm going to pay less, not more.
always.
And then I get a
Every
lot
day
of
I hear
founders
that.
who are like, well, it's a lot harder. They don't give a shit. It's harder
Every
to
day I
make
hear
and get
that
going.
line.
So
Yeah,
I
they don't
get a
care.
lot of makers who, there's a lot of great makers, and I get it. It is harder. It is more expensive. I get that. But so what a lot of brands have done is they've gone on market, $20. They're in the 20, 30, and it goes north from there because they're creaming off, and I'm going to say it pejoratively to kind of make the point. It's the, Lululemon wearing, they've got, you've got a therapist, you've got a gym, you've got your health and wellness consciousness is super high. You've got the disposable income. You're not turning labels for looking at prices. So people are prepared to pay for that at that
Yeah,
category. But that's not the growth in the market. The growth in the
yeah.
market in traditional wine is $12.99 or less. That's where over 50% of the sales come from.
For a
So
non-alc, for
no, for
non-alc wine.
alc.
Alc,
No,
yeah, yeah,
no.
yeah.
In the
Alc.
non-alc, there's hardly anything. there.
I was
So,
gonna say I don't know what would be in that price point, right?
well, we're working on something, and then is
Oh,
Sutter Home and some other things, but it's to speak to that point where you can. There's only so much high income urban customer you can cream
yeah,
off, and everyone's
yeah,
killing each other for that category, and it's good
yeah,
because there are a lot of good brands there, and I think there's a lot of people, and there's still a lot of entrants, people in that bracket who are coming into the market for the first time. So I'm not
yeah.
taking anything away from that, but so where are you with that? So one thing is you can try to bring your product price point down at the traditional 750. But the other thing is, and this is true in other CPG categories, you would know better than me, you can put it in a smaller package and you can price it at a lower price point. So like the one wine that I see a lot that I think's done a good job of this is Just Enough. So at low alc and at no alc, it's like, and we do this with Wander and Found. It's like, well, if you don't want to spend $22 for a 750, no specials, you can spend $3 for a can or a 4 pack, like $6, $8. And people are like, I'll try a non-alc at that price point. I don't need
I've been
750.
totally. I've been working with Jess and Caitlin for 4 years almost. I love it. And
Yeah,
I
it's
love
great.
the story that they built it based on, their one's, a mother
Yeah, it's in
now
the
and
name, right?
their needs have,
Yeah.
and the needs have changed. But like, I love the concept of getting a box of like, that they send me like, of their canned wine and then getting a box of like non-alc canned wine with like red and white and bubble. I think it's
Yeah, I like
great.
that new box that they have.
I love it. Yeah. And so that was kind of like, me, I'm like the anti-pitcher of anything, and I'm not pitching anything. I work with tons and tons of brands that you work with. I was just curious more on the format. I love
It's the
that I
format.
mean,
You need to have
it was on
something
brand for
smaller.
them,
Right.
but it was
Well,
on
that's
brand for
I'm using
them. Yeah.
they're a great they're kind of a lighthouse
They're a
example,
great
but there are
example.
others.
Yeah.
We do it with Wander and Found. I've got there's cans
And
around here
minis.
somewhere. Yeah, the
There's
minis.
minis.
Yeah, you can it's partly because the customer has an expectation of I will try this, but I'm not
Yeah.
paying I don't get thrown at, but I'm not going to pay the prices where most of these products are priced at. Plus, to the other way, it's just for me. My spouse isn't
Yeah.
drinking it. So
Yeah.
the other thing is the format size is too big. Like even for
Yeah.
restaurants, it's like if we're going to open a bottle, that bottle's going to sit on the shelf until that person comes back. Or so
Right.
it's like even the restaurant, even accounts like it because if they're going to open it, they can. It's a single serve, so they're good. Oh, he's up. Just so you know,
She's up. She's up.
she's
Yeah.
up.
She knows I have
Is
my
it
call at
feeding
one. She's
time?
always,
Oh, okay.
no, it's like
It's almost
Taylor
top of the
always
hour.
has. It's almost top of the hour. I pay her all the big bucks to be the,
Yeah, yeah. Keep you on.
time
Keep you on.
manager.
So I think you're right about until we come up with better ability, and I think part of it's scale. As the scale of this industry non outgrows, price points per unit will come down. It's classic, just standard stuff. But in the meantime, bringing smaller formats. People want smaller formats because they're
That's
testing and
all. Yeah,
trying,
I just
and
think it could
secondly,
be a
they need
good.
and a
Yeah.
lower price point. So you've got to
Yeah.
get people. You've got to make it easy for people to come into the category.
Yes. Yes. Once
And
you capture them, then give them the big
well, and
bottles.
it's even worse. Like there's another problem which we talk about a bit, but most it's not like there are regular repeat consumers, which is obviously what we want. Which is, I'll say 5% of the U.S. population regularly consumes non-alcoholic wine. I made that up. But I'll say 40% of the U.S. population has tried a non-alcoholic wine,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and of those, 35% were like, "Yep, it's just like I thought. It sucks." And then you lose them, right? And now you
Yeah.
got to bring them back. Part quality
Yeah.
is getting
True.
better, options are
True.
getting better, access is getting better, but price point for me is part of that equation where you've got to give them a reason to come back. It's like I'm not spending $25 on another bottle of non-alc wine again, but I'll try it here or I'll try it. Oh, it's easy. It's a glass at a restaurant. So it's all of those things. It's format, price point, access, quality, distribution. And I think that's where you're going to get them back. And I talk to a lot of makers a lot of times. It's like, that's the fight we're fighting, which is we go in a lot knowing that the growth in this category is to reach customers that have already tried. And I'm talking mostly about wine, but some of this applies to the other
Yeah.
subcategories. And they've had a not so great experience.
Could you do like so I worked for Flaviar, I worked for Speakeasy, which was a beverage, like
Yep.
it was an alcohol ecom platform, and then we got partner number one or two of the business. Beatbox was two.
Okay.
Speakeasy was one. Speakeasy now part of Flaviar. Flaviar's like built a whole business on like advent calendars and sampling and like,
Yeah,
is
that's
there
great.
something to be said? Yeah, like is there something to be said for doing, I mean, like literal vials of NA where people can pay. Again, it's going to be expensive and it sucks, and I get that, but you get to try like like a mini, vials of wine or vials of beer or all
Yeah,
these. You guys do
all of it.
great. You do great variety packs. So
Yeah,
I already
thanks.
know that you guys at Better Oats do incredible, like, custom packs and stuff like that and themes. Just food for thought is like a Flaviar or like on the whiskey side in alcohol.
Yes.
There are companies that make so much money, like Whiskey Raiders, and I don't even
Yeah.
know the names of all of them, that could do those little vials. Obviously, different. You have a little vial,
No,
you
I
feel
have.
something
They're out
that's
of
food for
reach now.
thought.
So I've seen it I've seen Ritual do it. I've seen another non-alc spirit
Yeah.
company called Abstinence do it. We're doing it with some of the new flavors for Sear Hill. So I think it's back to that same point. It's test. Now a lot of them they're using them for trade samples, and I was like, dude, I can
Oh,
sell
cool.
this,
Yeah.
which is great. But they
Yeah.
missed. I was like, no, I can sell these to
Consumers.
consumers. And
Yeah.
back to your point, they're like, oh, that's interesting. I think we're gonna have to call legal. It's like, well, just give
All
them a,
legal.
yeah, like no, but my point was, it's hard to make that shift and that change.
Yeah.
So with abstinence and some of the others, I'm like, this is great. They've got these sample packs, and it's so people can try, and the price point is lower, and they can kind of see
Yeah.
where that kind of comes in. So yeah, I think you're bang on. We're seeing it with wine in cans and smaller, and also 375s, smaller formats, and even piccolos, like going even smaller than that. Glass prices.
Piccolos. What's a
That's what we
piccolo?
used to call them. It's like a little, even smaller than
Oh,
a
I know what you're talking
375.
about. Yeah.
So there, and then with RTDs, with the small, almost like the little, like they used to have on airplanes, where you like it's a single shot or whatever. Doing those, A, because the price point, and B, it's back to the test and try. So what you were talking about in terms of advent calendars or things like that, I think those are great ideas, and a lot of people want a non-alc version of those types of things. So
I unfortunately have to leave you.
I have to, yeah, it's 1 minute. We don't, these normally only go like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So
I love
I,
it.
I enjoyed this. Thank you for digging in and geeking
I
out on some of
enjoyed
those
too.
pieces. Taylor Foxman,
Thank you for the
Industry Collective. How do
thank you
people,
for the opportunity.
of course, hopefully we'll talk again. Maybe every quarter we can check in because there's a lot
I would
happening right
love
now.
that. I would love that.
Or actually at least record it every once in a while. How do people reach you? Throw out your handles if you like.
My
I
handle
don't
just
know.
Taylor Foxman on LinkedIn.
All right, there you go. Taylor
Thank
Foxman,
you for
Industry
us. Yeah.
Collective, industry
Thank you.
expert. Thank you so much for the time and sharing your insights with
Thank
us.
you.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Alcohol Free Radio. We'd love to hear from you. Send us a message on social media or through email at hello@betterroads.com. Great to be here with you all together. Take care.